This is the theme of Setback in Blood Out. Professional setback. Michael can't get support. Select frames. And the phone call is essentially telling him about David, about a person at a crime scene, and it's David. And he's, the way that he comes to this scene, Michael comes to this scene, he comes like he's just a regular investigator. Like he got a call to come in and go to a crime scene and investigate a crime scene. Notice the difference in the clothing choices. You have these two men in suits, then you have David and his friend in sort of casual wear. All right, so they're all sort of this crowding around, the same crowding around that you saw when David was going to be killed. We have it here, right? It's just two different types of groups. They're formal in the way that they are handling it. Michael is asking questions, of course. Billy is just listening, and then the two guys are the other two cops who come from the big city precinct or answering his questions. So there's a little bit of a tension here when they're talking about what went down, and there's going to be an accusation of David being a stool pigeon, and there is a recognition that this is a gang-related situation. The guy with the clipboard, this is just business as usual. So you can essentially say that there's his blank face, nothing more than what we've seen all the time. So there's no real reason to get into any motion. So he's telling Michael that he has to sign in terms of conducting a positive ID that this is his brother on the ground who is dead. We don't get a funeral after this. No, Michael has a blank face. He doesn't cry over this situation. And that's kind of disheartening to see that he's not really moved by it. He's here trying to figure out what's going on with the case of his brother's death. So he continues to call. He was told by the two men that Detective Hardwick would contact him in a couple of days, but it's been more than a couple of days and Michael cannot get any answers. So there is some frustration here. There's still not a cry on his face, but there's some kind of intent to care about the situation. So after repeated calls, he couldn't get an answer. He decides to travel to that particular precinct. Now he's coming in with his uniform, as well as this staff person here holding a coffee coming in with a uniform. But he does look a little striking. It's funny how he was wearing a t-shirt and jeans, but now he has decided to wear his uniform. And what that suggests is that, one, he's crossing over from one precinct to the next, not necessarily crossing the color line, but he's crossing over. Two, he wants to demonstrate strength. He wants to demonstrate authority. There you go. Authority. Authority is the better word here, because whereas he's been calling authority figures and trying to get them on the phone to figure out what the status of the case, and they won't give it to him, and they won't tell him what's going on, he's going to come in and bring in the law. And he's the one who represents the law. And he's going to wear his uniform, and he's going to come in, and he's basically going to show them what's up. Understanding, though, not understanding that he hasn't conducted research on this particular precinct and how these people think. In the same way that his brother gets into something before he understands it, Michael is going to get into something before he understands it. And it's not going to have the best consequences for him. And it's going to lead him to then make a decision to go undercover, when in reality, had he come in with a prepared understanding in terms of who the cops are on this side of the pond, in a sense, right, and what they represent, meaning, conduct the research, because When he goes undercover, he's going to go undercover with the gang. Okay, the gang, the gang business, the gang hierarchy. But he's not going to go undercover with the cops. Now, does that make sense? Of course, because he's already exposed himself as the brother of David. And the other cops already know him from the crime scene as the brother of David. But it would have been interesting, though, for him to conduct a little bit more research before he came in with his moral attitude. So he's confronting Detective Hardwick, asking him about the status of the case, and that, and remember, he's entering another territory. So in some ways, he hasn't gotten a pass to come over there. He hasn't gotten permission to come over. He hasn't received an invitation. He has no appointment. He's just showing up. So then when you go to another territory without an invitation, the people who are guarding that territory are going to have a problem with your presence. No matter how demanding your presence is, no matter how intimidating your presence is, they're going to defend their own territory. So they have a conversation, and Michael is asking about the status of the case and what's going on, and why they haven't called him back, and what this all means. And the cops, right before Michael comes into the scene, you can tell they're not the best cops in terms of character and integrity. They're using bad language. They're just not acting respectable as cops. So he asks about the case file as being unsolved and is not resolved. And for them, however, David's murder is a problem solved. That's what they basically suggest, that David's murder is a problem solved. So there may be some implication that Detective Hardwick here is connected to the people, Zed, or to that larger, set, that larger gang set, that he may be connected. He may be someone who looks the other way. He may be someone who arrests people. He may even be someone who kills people. But when he says David's murder is solved, is a problem solved, that's already an inherent setback, because there was no investigation. And Michael, from his moral directive, tells him, you need to do your job. So there's something in this dynamic of being cops on both ends, that they need to do their job. And the irony is, as I noted in a previous frame, that Michael did not do his job in ensuring that the area was clear enough to go in and take down the meth lab. Detective Hardwick here is not doing his job in terms of investigating the murder, and also not returning phone calls. So there's a conflict with both. And the film is setting it up almost as, of course, a plot conflict, right? But it's also reflective of a setback, because then how would they both come back from this immediate encounter, right? There's going to be a conflict here that arises where he and the other men attack Michael Savion. So they take him by the arm, and arm hold the other cops, and it was Detective Hardwick who hit Michael Savion. So another cop hitting another cop for no good reason, right? And I assume that when Michael Savion said "do your job," that was offensive. Because if you are a type of person who doesn't do your job and someone tells you to do your job, that's going to be offensive. So when did Detective Hardwick, his setback begin with "do your job"? Somewhere he might have been the same type of person who got the job and was happy about it, and then had some disappointments and stopped doing his job. But I beg to differ, though, that if you are not a worker, you started out not as a worker. Now you're just wearing a badge, right? And you get to wear a suit as a detective. But if you are not the type of person who has a work ethic, that alone is a setback. If you're not the type of person that's a work ethic, because no one should have to cross territories and come into your environment and that you manage and you run and tell you to do your job. No one should have to do that. So if someone is coming into his territory to do that, that lets you know he hasn't been doing his job. That this is not the first time this has happened. And their attitudes, Detective Hardwick and the other officers' attitudes suggest that they're just there to collect a paycheck and wear a suit and say that they are detectives, right, and hold a gun. But they are not there to actually do any work. So instead of handling the problem with better strategy, they take out a taser now and tase Michael Savion. And it's interesting that they would choose that as an option as a solution to a person who is just simply asking the status of the case concerning his brother. And this too becomes a motivator for when he decides to go undercover. Again, he's not going undercover to resolve the issues with these cops and them not doing their job, because honestly, that would be the obvious strategy, the first obvious strategy. The fact that the writer-director gives him a different strategy and a different focus by infiltrating the gang group, whatever. Instead of giving Michael Savion the focus to try to understand that precinct and what's going on there and how to resolve those issues so we don't have those types of cops on the street, he's gonna bypass that problem and try to solve another problem, which is who shot my brother. And that's what I feel like that's a missed opportunity for him, because he's skipping process. He's skipping problems. He's not taking problems one at a time. And so I just thought that was kind of interesting. All right, they're laughing at him. He's on the ground. So the job that they did was the job of attack and intimidation and not the job of resolving a murder case. So now he's handcuffed in the bathroom, in a restroom. And so what this scene is suggesting, and what Detective Hardwick is suggesting by default, is that Michael Savion is the criminal. Now he's wearing his uniform. So he's clearly not a criminal, but they're treating him like a criminal. So it's a way for them to set him back, to keep him from getting at the truth of something. And so now let's mess with his psychology. Let's mess with his emotions. Detective Hardwick is holding some items of Michael Savion, including shades, and he's going to put those shades on. So he puts on his shades. He sort of mocks him in that situation, right? And you can tell that he took his gun. So the only thing he has is just still the uniform that he has on. They have this little stare off with each other. And that is the extent of their communication about the issue that Michael had coming in, which he still leaves unresolved with that particular environment. And so now Detective Hardwick again is sort of taunting him. Michael knows to keep his peace, right? Because if you do too much on another person's territory, it could cost you your life. right? David is very much an example of that he did too much and it cost him life. Even if he calls it innocently, that he went to talk to his brother, it was still too much. So Michael ends up leaving. He got the shades in his pocket. Billy comes to see him, and this thing about looking back, and you'll see this a lot of times in films that Luke Goss plays in. This looking back, I don't know if it's contemplative. I don't know. I know it's anger and maybe confusion, or maybe certitude that he understands what they really are. As him being a small town lawman, he gets the big city detectives more than the big city detectives get the small town lawman. Regardless, though, he still did not get what he needed from the situation, but it was in some ways enough intel to tell him what's really going on. All right, so hopefully you were able to gain some insight from this lecture. Please like, subscribe, and like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can visit my website, reginawhyfavors.com. You can always send me an email. Please purchase the book when it comes out. It's going to come out approximately August 2021. I needed to make some changes to it and do some final editing. So the book title is Overcoming Setback, 5 Keys for Entering and Exiting Correction. Thank you for listening to this audio. Have a great day.